Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this first Catz Chats, which is a new series of conversations designed to open a window on life at our college. Each chat will explore the work of our fellows and key members of staff and how they are delivering research, teaching, pastoral support and other areas of priority for the college. For those who may not have met me, I'm the Master of the College, Mark Welland, and I've been Master since September the 30th, 2016, one of those dates that's engraved upon my memory. For this chat, I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Holly Canuto, who's our Senior Tutor. She has probably the unique position in Cambridge history of being the only senior tutor that's come into post to an empty college. No students, no academic staff. We still get lunches, but that's about it. So Holly has had an incredibly difficult first few months, but has done incredibly well, I should say. So she's admitted in April this year, took over as senior tutor in April, and has had to oversee the very difficult decisions around COVID-19, not just on the immediate consequence for our students, but for the future. So, Holly, let me ask you, first of all, when you arrived at St. Catherine's, what were your first priorities when we welcomed you? And how were these thrown and discarded immediately by COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for the introductions as well. As you know, I was welcomed, I was inducted as a fellow in March. So at that point, we weren't quite sure. It was right at the beginning of March. And I think at that point, we didn't quite know, any of us, what was going to happen. Bit of overlap happened between Miranda Griffin and I, and then I took over as senior tutor on the 1st of April. And between the start of my induction, if you will, at the beginning of March, and starting as senior tutor, everything changed, as you said. We were in full lockdown. So we were at home, all of us, and we were thrown into this online world, all of us. So students, staff, as you said, fellows, everyone was in a very different world to the one that we were expecting, if you will, or what I was expecting as senior tutor. So I guess one can say the priorities I did have when I started and when I interviewed for this post, as you said, were thrown out the window, really. And everything had to change rapidly. And instead of, as you said, going into a Easter break, if you will, and spending time getting to know students and staff and fellows, it was a question of, right, okay, we are all online now. What are we going to do? And just to sort of add to the complexity of what was happening, I was in post the day after the university had informed students that Easter term was not going to go ahead and that all examinations, all the end of year examinations were going to be online. So this was a huge bit of news for everyone, but mainly for our students, because this meant that everything that they'd been doing was going to be very different. All their teaching in Easter term was going to be online, and as well as the examinations. On top of that, all the amazing support that St. Catherine is known for providing for students, that would also be online. So really my priorities were, how do we move everything that we do online, and how do we do it really well? So in terms of the teaching, for example, it was a question of speaking to colleagues. Lots of colleagues had phenomenal ideas on how to make teaching engaging online. Tutors, college counsellors, the chaplain, the welfare officer, all of our welfare teams already started to think about how they might move their support online. And the whole college really sort of came together in finding a way to work online, to work remotely. We all had maybe dodgy internet connections that we had to quickly get working. And so everything was really quite a dramatic change.
So, given all of that, given that you sort of got dropped in it, how do you think the first term went? How many marks out of 10 do you give yourself?
Oh, I could never mark myself. That's up to you. You can grade me. It's always very difficult to grade oneself. But I think I could certainly grade our students in giving them 10 out of 10 for resilience, for adapting, and for making it through a really challenging term. So it has gone very quickly, as I'm sure it's gone for you as well. It has been, I think, a very flexible term. I feel that, and as you know, I've been involved in college life in Cambridge for many, many years, so I do know what exam term is usually like. This year, I found that actually the flexibility and the immediate change that the university put in place in terms of the format of examinations was quite smooth. And I think the students have adapted to that. They've adapted to the fact that there is a lot of flexibility in their examinations. So, for example, they are sitting exams online, and it's a very different setting for them. So the university put in place, as you know, Mark, this safety net. And this safety net means that whatever they get this year can't be lower than the grade they got last year. This is for finalists. So anyone looking towards that graduation date, that excitement of finishing their degree, can feel that actually they're not going to be disadvantaged by whatever they get this year. They'll obviously do the best they can, but the grade they got last year will stand. So I think actually that was very, very helpful for students. The college helped with IT provision because obviously this was something that maybe students hadn't thought about. And as they're doing all their teaching and all their examinations online, it's very important that they had what they needed. So we obviously looked about making sure that people felt comfortable. But really, I think the term was all about making sure that everyone came together as a community and no one felt in any way disadvantaged. We're all disadvantaged because of the way that we're working, and it's all very different for us. But actually, we did work very hard to make sure that everyone felt supported, challenged academically, of course, but at the same time that everyone felt they could go into their examinations and their teaching. So tutors and supervisors could do their teaching with a sense of support from the whole college.
And I think that pretty much goes for all the colleges in Cambridge, that we've been, one of the things that stood out in this period is that all the colleges have been talking to each other. Certainly I have on a daily basis about all aspects of this. And that I think it's important also to recognise that whilst dealing with the crisis and making sure our students are supported in a very difficult term for some of them, finalists, that actually we have worked hard, not just on the current issues, but thinking about how we can bring Cambridge back to the place that we all know and love as quickly as possible. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I think there are some interesting lessons that we've learnt from this period, not simply about dealing with COVID, but actually more broadly, how we might be able to work better as a community across the university and support each other more effectively, even when we are back to normal. So I think there are some, although it has been difficult, there are some positives, I think, that I can see coming out of this that we can build on. And certainly I know you and I have spoken about this before. It's something we want to ensure going forward.
That's absolutely true. And can I just sort of highlight what I think, Mark, was one of the most positive aspects of this term, and I know you have enjoyed this as well, is the fact that we were aware that although there was all this flexibility, there was an aspect of college life that students were missing out on, which is graduation, festivities in summertime Cambridge, things that we all enjoy actually at the end of a very long academic year. And I know you're very excited, Mark, about the events that the initiatives we put in place to try and make sure that our graduating students, which, as you know, will come back next year, and they can go to Senate House and we can welcome them back in the way that we would usually. But this year we wanted to make sure that for those who are graduating and moving on, that they weren't forgotten. And so we tried to find sort of an innovative way of celebrating them, didn't we, Mark? And we had that very exciting morning, actually, very sunny morning, where we had a video for our graduates, which you and Toby starred in, which came out last week, which was quite exciting because we hadn't really been much out. I hadn't been in college very much, and we had to social distance, but also the skywriting. So the massive heart that appeared over the college last week, which I'm sure you and maybe Toby enjoyed last week. And there's one more surprise, which you know about, Mark, but we'll talk about it once the students know about it too. Yeah.
No, it was a great day, but masters of colleges don't get excited, Holly.
No, I know.
The dog, absolutely.
It's my job to get excited, and for you not to.
Yeah.
So, Mark, I just wanted to ask you, moving maybe a little bit away from these festivities and to something which, when I joined St Catherine's, I was aware that there were lots of, St Catherine's was very active. There were lots of events going on, and I think that the question that I had is, you had most specifically the Legacy of Enslavement project that ran at St Catherine's, and I was really interested in hearing a little bit more about this from your perspective.
Well, I think it started with the realization that the bell that sat prominently above Main Court came from a slave plantation in Guyana, and the need for the college to respond to that, and which we did, and that's, it was in national newspapers. We used it as a tool for learning. But that was a start of a process. I mean, the bell is going to be in the Rijksmuseum, which is one of the most famous museums in the world, for a special exhibition on slavery, where its position in St Catherine's and its role in the slavery process will be fully explained for the 3 million people that come to the Rijksmuseum a year. And it will then go to Guyana, back to where it came from, where there's going to be a new museum for slavery. So I think it's going to be used as an educational tool, and we're an educational establishment. And beyond that, there were already questions about the legacies of enslavement across the whole of the university. So we decided we would do some intensive work over the summer, and we had a number of students last summer working on going back through all of the college records and working out what association, if any, the college had with slavery. And we did that work. Students did an incredible job. We had a seminar, and that work continues. The work specifically on enslavement. The university is doing its own study. We're way ahead of the curve in respect to the university, but we're feeding into that. But more than that, we are looking at further elements of how we can respond to diversity, equality, and inclusion. So we are establishing a new working group, just as we speak, that will be looking across all aspects of college life. How can we ensure everything, whether it's the design of the buildings, the appointment of staff, fellows, whether it's how we attract our students from the diverse a background as possible. We will have a working group that will have the influence to affect any aspect of college life, so that we always say at St Catherine's that our doors are open to everybody, irrespective of background and irrespective of financial situation, and we need to deliver that, and I'm personally very committed to that. We have plans for, in October, we have our Black members of our community are celebrating Black History Month, and the college is already planning for that and producing a whole range of documents and vignettes of our students, our past students, that we can share during that month. So it's hugely important diversity in our community, equality in our community, inclusivity in our community. These are all incredibly important parts of our lives. And we are, as a college, committed to that, as is, of course, the university, but we will play a strong role in supporting those elements of college life.
Thank you, Mark. And I think that ties in quite nicely with a lot of the strategic plans of the college. Do you think that those have changed quite a bit in terms of, well, in light of the pandemic?
So one of the interesting challenges for the pandemic as a master of a college is you have to respond to the immediacy of telling the students to all go home, to help the staff cope with suddenly not having a place to work because they needed to go home and in some cases be furloughed. But at the same time, we have to remember, the college was founded in 1473. It's been through all sorts of wars and other pandemics. So whilst we are conscious of our past and we respect our past, we have to look after the present, manage the present, but we also have to have that eye on the future. We have to make sure that our strategic plan, Our College, Our Future, which was looking long ahead, not necessarily for, what a building is going to look like in 2 years' time, but the plan was built around what will the students who are yet to be born think when they walk through the gates of the college in 20, 30, 50 years' time. And so even though we had the immediacy of dealing with COVID-19, we had to keep our eye on the future because we are such a long-standing institution in the university. And that has been difficult in cases, but we took, I think, a very balanced perspective of keeping our strategy intact, but nuancing it where we needed to give priorities earlier or later so that the consequences of COVID in the short term and the medium term could be optimally dealt with. So I think yes, of course it's had an effect, but we had to also have that sense of the history of the college and an expectation that history, that we are simply a part of that history, and people will be looking back in the college in another 500 years' time at this phase. And I hope they'll be very proud of the decisions we made in this time and the extraordinary changes that there will be to college life. Related to that point of sort of looking forward, what do you think as a community we've learnt this term that we might take forward to next year, bearing in mind that we want to get back to what we all know is normal as soon as possible?
Yes, we do. I think it goes back to the point you mentioned before, didn't it? Doesn't it? Some of the points that you mentioned about the community coming together. I think one thing that we will have to maybe change or take on board after this period is the online working, because I think all of us have got used to maybe working 24 hours a day with the Zoom and Teams on all the time. So I think if we want to look at it in a slightly humorous way, we will have to start to adapt, I think, to maybe working a little less hard than we do at the moment, because I think especially you, Mark, you seem to be on Teams and Zoom all the time, so I think we will need to think about that. But actually, joking apart, I think what really has brought us through this very difficult time, and I know won't change because I think this is really the ethos of St Catherine's, is the community spirit. I think the fact that we wouldn't have got through this term if staff, students, fellows hadn't come together as a community in a very strong and supportive manner. And yes, next term is going to be tough, isn't it? We appreciate that, but we will approach it in a very joined up and united way. And it will be difficult, but it will go well. I'm sure of it.
Well, I think we should come on in a minute and talk about our vision of what next year might be like.
Indeed. But before that, I was just thinking, because Mark, I don't live in Cambridge, so I live a little bit further out. But for the moment, you have been in the centre of college, working and living on site. And I've often wondered what it's been like for you to actually have been there throughout the whole of the lockdown.
Yeah. When the students were here, especially early in this term, I would take some pleasure in going into main court very early in the morning before anybody's up and sitting on the benches under the chapel and just enjoying the peace and stillness of the college, knowing full well that in not too many hours it would be full of students running around, getting ready to celebrate their finals, hustle and bustle of college and city life. But you realise very quickly, being here all the time in an echoing, empty college, that the college is only alive when our students are here. And so actually, you could say, well, we have a nice big lodge to live in, although we've had the minimum number of people we've had living here is 6, and it fluctuates between 6 and 9, but with my children and their various partners. But the reality is that it's very lonely. It's not comfortable to walk out into the college every day and for it to be just empty windows, no sound, nothing. So I think that, peace and quiet we all yearn for peace and quiet, but I think in this environment, I'd rather it was full of students again. So I think that's been the biggest challenge. We've all had the same challenges of trying to get food and living with each other and try not to argue too much. We've had all of that. It's been very strange walking down the backs with the dog. Normally if I take him at sort of 7 o'clock in the evening, the backs is full of people, completely empty. So not to be repeated, I hope. So let's hope there's not a second wave and we all end up like this again. So that I think that's it. It's let's look forward to our students coming back.
Let's do that, and let's look forward to next year, which so far looks promising, doesn't it, Mark? It looks like the university is going to be open. We are getting ready to welcome students back in October. Same dates of term as expected. We are going to be providing the same level, if not more, of support in terms of tutorial welfare for students. We will need to think, and actually one of our tutors described this wonderfully, we need to plan for pandemic-friendly pursuits for students because we are likely to still have social distancing rules. So we have to think outside the box. We have to think of ways to make sure that our students feel the excitement of coming up to Cambridge for the first time, as well as coming back to Cambridge, so students who are returning for their 2nd or 3rd or 5th or 6th years. So we really do need to think over the summer of making sure that we have in place, and we've got plenty of ideas, as you know, Mark, I run them past you often, of how to do that. In terms of the teaching, there's going to be supervisions happening. So anything that we can, the university and the college can actually do in terms of social distancing rules. So supervisions will be in person, practicals as well, seminars, really teaching that is in a small group. So maybe those research seminars can happen. Large lectures, as you know, Mark, for the moment, it looks like they're not going to happen. They will be online. But part of me also does appreciate that the Faculty of Biology has been asked many times by students to put lectures online and to get more departments to do this. So I'm hopeful that actually this will be encouraging to students, because it's something that they have wanted for a while. Obviously, they'd like the option. I do appreciate that. And it looks like, and Mark, obviously you can maybe tell us a little bit more about this in your own department, but it does look like if social distancing is relaxed, then we could go back to having full lectures happening in person.
Yeah, I would echo in engineering, we've been making lectures available as a podcast or online for some time, actually, because of student demand. And so in some sense, that is partially business as usual. I think, the philosophy is that we want to get back to business as usual in any way we can. And where we cannot, look for alternatives. So, we're all very confident that we can deliver that, by the time we get to October. So I think all of that's positive. You didn't mention rowing, which is, of course, slightly more difficult. So I did have a vision of a rowing 8 with perspex screens in between each rower so that it could sort of glide along the river and with a following wind. But we will be thinking creatively about all of that. So there's a question from Andrew Smith. Do you think, albeit at this very early stage, you consider there have been any really positive aspects of the current distanced setup that you might consider to embed in the way Catz will operate in any future normal? Well, I think we sort of partially covered that. I think that increased use of electronic media to communicate. So, for example, we have all these college committees and everybody's required to sit in a room for those committees. And I think one thing we have learned is that we don't necessarily have all these committee meetings electronically, but there's no reason why you should not be able to join a meeting electronically. So I think there will be things we've learned, and we are looking at that. We're recovering from COVID-19, but we're refreshing our future as a consequence, and that is a sort of a commitment that we have. So it's a good point, but fundamentally, people are very social, and we miss being with each other. It's as simple as that. I should say that Holly is going to be wine steward from October, so she will have to do a lot of socializing on top of her normal job, but with the added lubrication of a glass of wine. So
we hope I can come in.
The cellars are open, I can vouch for that.
Perfect. And I'll be there alone. Perfect.
All right, but for now, certainly from me, thank you all very much. Thank you, Holly, again.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye.